I just drove 50 kilometers to see that plane, a MiG-21 Lancer. Odd, right? This is a motorcycling channel. So what's the common denominator between a fighter jet, the Dakar Rally, and an absolute hatred for motorcycles? Probably didn't guess it, but it's actually the Vespa. And this is just scratching the surface of its fascinating story. Welcome to Origins. Okay, it's freezing, I need to go. The Vespa is an icon of design. Beautiful, quintessentially Italian design. But it's actually not. The design has never been a top priority. In fact, it was simply a side effect of the amazing engineering that went into this. An Italian company called Piaggio initially created this scooter, and long story short, Piaggio had a background in aviation. In fact, they built Italy's most important planes in World War II. That's why a lot of the components of the original Vespa have origins in actual flying planes. Take the engine, for example. In its first incarnation, it was actually an engine used to start other airplane engines. At least that's the biggest myth around the Vespa. And as all good myths are, this is actually just that. A myth. Look, Piaggio did indeed have a background in airplanes, but the engine just wasn't it. Everything else, though? That's different. Starting with the frame, it had a pressed steel monocoque chassis. This was never before seen, no tubes to form a frame. The bodywork of the Vespa was its main structural point as well. Then the wheels, which were actually borrowed from the landing gear of a small plane. And the front suspension, which is not a fork. Just look at it, it's actually an airplane lever suspension shrinked down. The steel panels that formed the bodywork were spot welded in place and handlebar controls were introduced. Your feet had nothing else to do but rest. You think that's it? Nowhere near close. The front sheet sheltering the rider from conditions was initially made of aero material. Take the rear section. Does it resemble anything? Yeah, it's the exact shape of a plane wing. But why? Why did a company specializing in combat aeroplanes suddenly decide to switch over to dinky little two-wheeled vehicles? Why would anyone do that? And why aren't you subscribed to this channel yet? Piaggio's history is actually painted with blood, sweat and tears. They were Italy's main manufacturer of bombers in the Second World War, with aircrafts like the P-108 or the P-50. They were monsters, with engines capable of producing in excess of 1,000 horsepower. Unfortunately, Italy's position in that war proved to be the wrong one. And the Allies were aware, bombing most of Piaggio's factories. By the time World War II was over, so was Piaggio, and its future alongside with it. After the war ended, Italy was basically banned from producing any military equipment for at least 10 years. Piaggio had one chance to rise from the ashes. In an Italy that was devastated by a cold and bloody war, people needed some means of transportation. Something that could squeeze by all the rubble from bombings, something cheap and simple, reliable. Italy's infrastructure was in bits, and its economic situation, that was even worse. One day, Enrico Piaggio decided that it was time to do a 180. One last chance to help the business. And most importantly, help Italy. He decided to convert the bombed factory of Pontedera into a mass-market vehicle manufacturing plant. To start off, he took a close look at the well bike. This little vehicle was used by paratroopers. It was parachuted along with infantry into combat zones. It was simple and robust. Maybe a bit too simple and too robust. That's when the Paperino appeared, also known as the Donald Duck concept. And Enrico? He absolutely hated it. He wanted something new, something original, something that would have mass appeal. The Paperino wasn't it. Enrico had one last chance, one more try at it. That's when he hired Corradino d'Ascanio. But this looked like a horrible idea. You see, d'Ascanio was an aeronautical engineer. He was amazing at designing flying vehicles like helicopters and planes, but he had no experience whatsoever in commercial transport, especially not the two-wheeled version. And to make things worse, he not only didn't have the experience, he absolutely hated the idea of motorcycles. You'd think this would be a recipe for disaster, but think again. Who better to design a vehicle for average people, people who didn't care about bikes, people who simply cared for getting from A to B, than a guy who hates the idea of two-wheeled vehicles? It was a strike of genius. And I'm not talking only about Piaggio's hire. The result of this final breath for Piaggio was stunning.
I've been walking on the same shore ever since the time I left you on the dark side with a promise and a rhyme. And everybody...
It featured a step-through design, which meant that even women could ride a Vespa in skirts, and they didn't have to fight balancing a motorcycle since their feet would be a few centimeters away from the ground. The engine was tied directly to the back wheel, meaning no one needed to get dirty cleaning chains. The design also meant costs could be cut everywhere, like the fuel cap sitting under the seat, so Piaggio didn't need to invest into a separate lock for the cap.
This was more than a new product, it was a revolution. The only thing left was to name the thing. And this couldn't come easier, since Piaggio's first reaction to seeing the initial prototype was
"Sembra una Vespa." It looks like a wasp.
And so the most iconic two-wheeled name ever was born. In 1946, Piaggio applied for a patent for motorcycle of a rational complexity of organs and elements combined with a frame with mudguards and a casing covering the whole mechanical part. Awfully specific, true, but this allowed them to go to market.
Initially, Piaggio tried to get Moto Guzzi to stock their bikes, to use their distribution network. But they laughed it off, thinking the Vespa was just a silly joke. I guess we know who had the last laugh, since today Piaggio owns Moto Guzzi. But still, the beginning was slow. In 1946, they sold 50 units, barely. Until they introduced what could basically be called financing.
You see, the Vespa wasn't actually that cheap. An average Italian would need to spend about 6 salaries to get one. But the Vespa wasn't seen as a fashion icon, it was a utility. It was the way of getting around. And so people saw a Vespa as an investment, and that's when it blew off.
1 year later, in 47, they already sold 2.5 thousand units. In 48, they quadrupled the number to 10,000. 2 years later, they got up to 60,000, and just 6 years later, the 1 millionth Vespa left the factory floors. Now, in 2022, every 3 minutes or less, a new Vespa leaves the factory. Let that sink in.
There are plenty of vehicles that impress with their sales volume, like a Toyota Corolla. But then the Corolla was never an icon. The Vespa, it cemented its image into everyone's minds.
When launched, the Times called it a completely Italian product such as we have not seen since the Roman chariot. Vespare became a common word in the Italian language, meaning traveling somewhere with a Vespa. Sort of like Googling. And then there is the pop icons it helped create. When a little movie called Roman Holiday came out in 1952, people fell in love with the little scooter. So much in fact that it sold over 100,000. I'm not talking about movie tickets, I'm talking about Vespas. And it didn't stop there, the Vespa made multiple other appearances, including in films like Transformers.
You see, the Vespa transcended its utilitarian status. It turned into a symbol for the beauty of simplicity in life. And also a symbol for hope. Hope for an Italy that was seeing dark in front of their eyes. This hope and inspiration gave birth to quite a few versions of the Vespa. I'm not talking about different engines and stuff, no. I mean other use cases.
For example, in 1951, Piaggio built a Vespa 125cc prototype called the Siluro. Why is that interesting? Because for a moment, this Vespa held the world speed record at 171 km per hour on a Vespa in 1951. Same year, Piaggio signed up for the 6-day trials, winning 9 gold medals on Vespas. A year later, a crazy Frenchman managed to cross the English Channel for a Paris to London race on an amphibious Vespa.
And it gets even more ridiculous. An Italian student had a dream of reaching the Arctic Circle on a motorized vehicle.
That vehicle? A Vespa. And that's nothing, because in 1980, 2 riders actually managed to sign up for the Paris-Dakar rally and got to the finish line on freaking Vespas. And you can thank the little scooter for your safety as well, because of the Vespa 150 TAP.
An anti-tank Vespa with a 75mm rifle. Yes, you heard that right, anti-tank Vespa.
The pragmatic in me wants to say that the reason people choose Vespas is because they hold their value incredibly well.
But really, I'd be lying to myself. The Vespa is the definition of an automotive icon. Thousands of Vespa clubs exist all around the world, Vespa parades and Vespa everything.
In fact, in '55, a little event was created called Vespa World Days. Ever since, this event takes place annually in different parts of the world each year, with up to 6,000 Vespas from over 40 countries showing up to each. It's part of our culture, our legacy.
Right when I'm in the dark.
You see, people are dedicated to the Vespa, to the idea that it promotes, the vision. That's how the Do You Vespa contest was created, where people all around the world submitted films expressing what the Vespa means to each and every one of them. Piaggio really managed to create the Apple of the motorcycling world. A cult following, one that is not based on the product, but on the idea, on how it makes you think and feel. Vespa doesn't sell you scooters, it sells a way of life. An entry ticket to an exclusive club, a family to join.
When it comes down to it, this is the legacy of the Vespa. It became an icon, a symbol for hope, beauty and simplicity. A symbol embodied on two wheels for people who don't care about two wheels. I hope you got to enjoy watching this little episode of Origins. If you want to check another one on the story of KTM, click here. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and until next time, have a good one. Bye.